Welcome to the Profitable Sugar Bean Production webinar. My name is Wendy Madzura. With me today is Emmanuel Ziramba, and we are going to be taking you through the profitable sugar bean production story. We do hope that in light of COVID-19, you are staying safe and also adhering to the stipulated regulations of COVID-19. Now for the housekeeping issues, we just need to highlight a few issues. The presentation is being recorded and it will be shared. A PowerPoint presentation will be beamed on the screen during the presentation, and typed questions are invited and the answers will be provided in the chat column or at the end of the presentation. Now for the layout of the presentation. We are going to start off by looking at the essential elements in agriculture. We'll then move on to look at crop selection factors. Before we look at the gist of the issue, which is sugar bean production, we will talk about the profitability, the profit story of sugar bean production, and then we'll look at the variety selection issues, and we'll wrap it up by looking at the agronomic practices that will unlock the genetic potential of the varieties that you will have selected. So for crop production to be profitable, there are essential elements that need to be taken into account. First and foremost, you need to take note of the genetics, which is the germplasm. If you're going to be profitable, you need to start right. You need to start with the right seed. So the right seed will enable you to get high yield, high disease tolerance, high tolerance to problematic diseases that might occur in that particular crop that you will be establishing. You also need to take note of the soil. The soil is the main growing media that we use, particularly here in Zimbabwe and the countries in Africa, in growing our crops. So we need to nurture our soils. We need to treat our soils for acidity and make sure that the soils are providing the much needed nutrients and water for the crops to grow well. Also, we need to take into account the weather or the climate, so to say. The unforeseen weather vagaries that we constantly see in light of climate change should be accounted for in crop production, where we need to adapt by adopting and getting climate smart varieties that are going to yield despite the climate challenges, which include dry spells, mid-season dry spells, a false start to the season, persistent rainfall like we are seeing nowadays, and also we get to prepare for the differences in altitude that we see in our different agroecological regions. Last but not least is the management. The management is the glue that is going to wrap up all these elements and make sure that we get the much needed yield levels from the genetics that we will have established. On crop selection, there are 1,000 reasons for low yields, so many that we cannot even list and exhaust them. But there are only 2 reasons for higher yields: using seed co-seed and adopting good agronomic practices. So on the colorful screen that you are seeing, we just thought of highlighting that seedco is a very wide product basket of field crops and horticultural crops that can be grown extensively across different environments, from maize, soybean, wheat, small or traditional grains to sugar bean. And the list for the horticultural crops is endless. Now, why grow sugar beans? Sugar bean is a valuable source of protein. The protein value from sugar bean can range between 15 to 25%. And it also enhances the soil structure because it adds on the fertility of the soil through nitrogen fixation. It is especially if you're going to incorporate the crop residue after harvesting. Good crop rotation as well is what we get from growing sugar bean, because imagine if you're going to grow maize, then follow up by putting sugar bean. It means you have a chance of curbing the problem of fall armyworm and maybe the African armyworm, because these are crops in different families. The dollar value is what we speak to nowadays, because farming has become a lucrative, potentially lucrative business. So we want to speak to the dollar value of any cropping venture. This brings us to the issue of sugar bean production profit story. So the profit story of sugar bean. For any cropping venture to be profitable, you need to push your yield levels as high as possible. This is because if you push your levels of yield high and maintain the same variable cost, plus or minus, and manage to obtain a high price on the market, this will increase your return per dollar invested, which is the end game. This is the profit. So for sugar bean production, if you aim to achieve yield levels of between 2 to 3 tons per hectare at a variable cost of 800 to 900 plus and a selling price of about 1,000, then the return per dollar invested will range between $2.50 to about $3.50, plus or minus, depending on the market that you're going to sell your crop. The break-even yield for sugar bean is between 0.8 to 1 ton per hectare. So you really need to take note of the profit story of any crop before you venture into it, because farming is indeed a profitable business. Now, to just highlight some variety selection tips. Selecting high-yielding varieties with defensive agronomic traits that are adapted to climatic, which are the abiotic factors, as well as the biotic factors, which include disease pressure, is important because it feeds into your profitability as well as production level. The amount and distribution of rainfall, which is the seasonal forecast, the length of the growing season, altitude and air temperature in line with the agroecological regions. This is very important because it will guide you on whether or not your crop will make it to full maturity, especially if it's purely a rain-fed crop. Soil fertility and fertilizer management, bearing in mind that some crops have the potential to fix nitrogen, like your legumes, and some crops rely solely on applied fertilizer or nutrition. Planting dates, plant density standability, because looking at the standability issue, your harvesting might be affected by the choice of variety that you will have established, because some crops might have an erect nature, some might have a training nature. So you also need to look at the occurrence of diseases, your rotation plan, as well as your management. Narrowing it down to sugar bean, variety, or crop selection, you really need to understand that yield is the end game, and it is the determining factor when selecting our varieties. Sitco varieties are known for their high yield potentials, and in sugar bean, we have not spared you the varieties that are high yielding and disease tolerant, as you will hear from Emmanuel when he gets a time to speak about the varieties. Market preference is also quite pivotal in your selection of sugar bean variety, because in some markets they might prefer the speckled ones, some might prefer the red ones. The different types will be alluded to as we continue with the presentation. The growth habit, which speaks to the variety being either determinate or indeterminate, is also very important. The soil and climatic conditions, disease tolerance, rotation. Most of all, the take-home message is you need to establish high quality certified seed and desist from establishing seed that has been harvested from previous seasons, which we call retained seed. Because retained seed has lost its vigor and it has chances of high disease pressure, which will result in low yields. On that note, I'll hand you over to Emmanuel to take us through the types of dry beans that are available in the market and the most preferred ones. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Oh, Wendy, please, and mute your mic. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk about the types of dry bean. So first and foremostly, dry bean is any type of bean that is edible in its dry form. So they range from black beans, navy bean, navy bean, we call them Michigan pea bean as well, and cranberry beans. These are what we call sugar beans. So in Sitco portfolio, we have the sugar bean and the navy bean. So I will start off with GADRA. GADRA is a sugar type which is purple speckles on a beige base. Its seed size is medium and its growth habit is determinate. It's upright, it doesn't easily lodge. The grain yield potential of GADRA is 2.5 tons per hectare, and its plant height is 50 centimeters. Its unique characteristic is that it's ultra early. It matures in 65 days. And its days to flowering is 27 to 30 days. It takes 15 days from maturity to first shattering. So you have a window of harvesting your crop before it shatters. GADRA, because of its uprightness and determinate stature, it's very suitable for using a combine to combine it. Its seed rate per hectare is 110 kgs, and you can plant up to 400,000 plants per hectare. And we recommend that GADRA can be grown in the low veld and middle veld as well. Its pod clearance distance is 9 centimeters, and it has got very beautiful purple or violet flowers. Then we go to SC UKULINGA. SC UKULINGA as well is a sugar type, and its class is red speckled. It has got a very, very large seed. Its growth habit is determinate or upright as well. It's similar to GADRA. Its grain yield potential is also similar to GADRA, 2.5 tons per hectare, which means it has got a potential to have high yields. Its plant height is 60 centimeters, unlike of GADRA, which is a little bit shorter. Its unique characteristic is that it has got a large grain. Days to flowering, 35 to 40 days. Days to maturity, 85 to 95 days. And another advantage of UKULINGA is that it has 21 days from maturity to pod shattering. It's very suitable to use a combine to harvest UKULINGA. Its seed rate per hectare, it's 120 kgs per hectare because of its large seededness. And you can put up to 350,000 plants per hectare maximum. It's also recommended to grow it in the low veld and middle veld. Pod clearance is 10 centimeters and it has got white flowers. Then our next variety is, our next variety is CALEDON. CALEDON is a navy type. We usually call it Michigan pea bean. It's classified in the small white category, and its seed size is small. Our varieties, most of them are now determinate and upright, which makes them easy to combine. And its grain yield potential is 3 tons per hectare. It's one of the highest yielding varieties that we have in our dry bin basket. It can reach a plant height of 50 centimeters, and it's very, very suitable for canning. And many cane companies are looking for these particular varieties. Its days to flowering is 39, days to maturity 85, and 25 days from maturity to pod shattering. The seed rate is 120 kgs per hectare, and you can plant up to 400,000 plants per hectare. Its pod clearance is 8 centimeters and it comprises of white flowers. And our next variety, I'm going to combine two varieties here because they are very, very similar, Bounty and Sharp. They are both sugar types with red speckles and medium-sized seeds. they are indeterminate. Unlike the other three varieties that I have been talking about, Bounty and Sharp are indeterminate and twining. They've got an elongated stem that tends to twine as it grows. The grain yield potential of Bounty and Sharp is 2.5 tons per hectare, and they can reach up to 70 centimeters in height. Special characteristics of these two varieties is that they have got very, very tasty grain. They take 25 to 30 days to flowering and 65 to 75 days. Sorry, I think there was a mistake here. It's 85 to 95 days to maturity. Sorry for that. Days to shattering is 21 days from maturity up to first pod shattering. They are not suitable for combine harvesting because of their twining nature. The seed rate per hectare is 100 kgs per hectare, and you can plant up to 300,000 plants per hectare. Both have got white flowers, and the pod clearance of both is 6 centimeters. I will hand over to Wendy.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for that detailed explanation of the varieties that we have at SEEDCO. Clearly, at SEEDCO, there's a product for every farmer. So now, having had all these varieties and their potential yields that you can, and the potential yields that you can get from establishing them, it's now time for us to unlock the genetic potential of these exceptional SEEDCO varieties by employing good agronomic practices that are listed on the picture below. Just to highlight the general conditions that you need to look at when you want to establish sugar bean. Sugar bean is sensitive to excessive temperatures of above 30 degrees and to a lack of or too much rainfall, which is why for those farmers who wanted to establish around the end of December, it was a bit tricky because of the rainfall that was persistently received during that time. So it's tricky for you to establish sugar bean during a time when rainfall is very high. It is also not a crop to be established in frost-prone areas during periods of frost. However, the crop is highly adapted to a wide range of pH levels from 5.3 to 6.5 on the calcium chloride scale, but it doesn't perform very well in sandy soils. It prefers a clay content of 15 to 20%, 20% and above. That is the clay content that it prefers. And also in terms of the amount of water that you're going to require to establish a sugar bean crop and reach maturity without facing any challenges is between 450 to 650 millimeters of rainfall or of irrigated water. Now to look at the land preparation issues. Deep plowing is encouraged to aid drainage and root penetration and minimum tillage is also advocated for. Where minimum tillage speaks to issues to do with conservation agriculture, if you're going to do it at a small scale, it's a matter of opening up your furrows to a depth that is recommended, as you will see during the course of the presentation. If you are going to use highly specialized equipment on a large scale, there is equipment that speaks to conservation agriculture because we are moving with the times and we also want to be climate smart and adopt measures of land preparation that are conservative of the environment. Irrigation to field capacity is recommended to a depth of between 45 to about 60 centimeters, depending on the soil type. You can also plant when you have received effective rains of 30 millimeters or above, so that you can establish your crop effectively without the risk of it starting the process of germinating, but failing to emerge from the ground because of a dry spell. But suffice to say, this year, we are fortunate enough to say most parts of the country are receiving rainfall. Plant sugar beans on ridges or on a flat seedbed. On ridges, it's recommended highly because of the issue to do with drainage. Waterlogged conditions will affect the sugar bean crop, especially those who practice flood irrigation when they're going to establish their crop through the winter period in the low veld, where the heat units, even through winter, are a bit warmer. Fine tilt is now what we want to talk about. What is fine tilt and how important is it? Fine tilt is important because if you do your land preparation and achieve a fine tilt, it means that you have very fine granular particles of soil. And this will enable a crop like sugar beet, which endures epigeal germination, to germinate well. It also requires a fine tilt for good seed to soil contact and effective germination. It reduces weed infestation at crop establishment and therefore gives the crop a good head start. There on the pictures you are seeing below are examples of epigeal germination occurring in sugar beet production. And as you can see, the hypocotyl, which is the neck area that is going to emerge from the ground, is quite sensitive and delicate. Imagine if that delicate hypocotyl meets a crusty hard layer, it will break. If it meets a clod or huge clods in the field due to land preparation that has not achieved a fine tilt, it will break. So we really need to aim to achieve a fine tilt, be it in the planting rows that we are going to be planting in the furrows, or in the when we are using mechanical planting in conventional tillage, you aim to achieve a fine tilt so that you don't have large boulders or clods that will affect germination. I'll hand you over to Emmanuel to take us through the time of planting, seed rates, and some planting tips as you establish your sugar beet crop.
So the recommended time for planting dry bean or sugar bean is from the 15th of January to the 15th of February in the middle veld. And in the low veld, it's from the 15th of February to the 15th of April. And normally it's under irrigation. After the winter frost in winter-prone areas, in frost-prone areas, you can plant your sugar bean from the end of July up to 15 August. If you go beyond 15 August, you risk your sugar bean getting coinciding with the rains, and your sugar bean quality will be very, very poor. Seed rates, we go now to seed rates. You need about 100 to 120 kgs per hectare, depending on the variety. You need to treat your seed before you plant to protect your seedlings from the pests, early pests, and also from some dumping off and some fungal pathogens. So you need to treat with either Thiram, Captain, Gaucho, or to mix. For those who intend to top dress, we don't encourage you to inoculate your seed with rhizobium. But if you don't intend to top dress, you can use rhizobium. It's easily available from the Grasslands laboratory. And to the right is our farmer, Mr. Muonde, in Nyamaropa, in the Loveld. And now we go to the planting and plant population. So sugar bean, you either plant them manually or you can use a planter. So planting it manually, you need to mark out furrows that are 2.5 to 4 centimeters deep. Don't deep plant your sugar bean because it won't germinate. You'll be burying it for good. The interrow spacing recommended, the range is from 45 to 60 centimeters. The in-row spacing also ranges from 5 to 10 centimeters, depending on the target population. So you can use a soybean planter to plant mechanically. Of course, you need to do some adjustments and some modifications probably. The recommended plant population for sugar bean or dry bean is 250,000 plants to 400,000 plants per hectare. And the planting depth is from 2.5 to 3.5 centimeters, depending on the type of soil in your region. Then on fertilizer application, we recommend farmers to analyze to send their soil samples for analysis so that they get recommendations pertaining the basal fertilizer that is needed in their particular fields. The general recommendation for basal fertilizer is 200 to 300 kgs per hectare of compound D. So it depends on the fertilizer that you have. If you have cereal blend, you can apply 150 to 250 kgs per hectare. And for double D, you reduce your rate by half to 100 to 150 kgs per hectare. The method of application we recommend farmers is to broadcast, then you incorporate the fertilizer, the basal fertilizer into the soil, maybe through disking. Or if you don't manage to broadcast and incorporate, you can use bending. Put your fertilizer in furrows, and as you cover the seeds, you mix both the seed and the fertilizer in the soil so that you avoid burning the seedling. Right, on top dressing, for those who use top dressing fertilizer, we recommend a rate of 150 to 200 kgs of ammonium nitrate per hectare. Normally, you need to top dress your fertilizer, your bin at 25 to 30 days after planting, but make sure that you top dress before the flowering commences. Another important factor is that you don't need to put a lot of AN because it results in rank growth, excessive vegetative growth at the expense of reproductive growth. Right, there is a tip that we have put here. You can use cup number 5 to bend your basal fertilizer at 30 to 40 centimeter stretch. Okay, now we move on to our next slide.
Thank you. Thank you, Emmanuel, for explaining to us the time of planting and the planting tips. I hope we are all taking notes. But for the purposes of the questions that we are seeing, this presentation is being recorded and it will be shared, and we'll attend to the questions at the end of the presentation, though some of them we are typing responses. Effective weed control is important, not only in sugar bean production, but in crop production as a general or broad term, because weeds compete with your crop for nutrients, growing space, moisture, as well as tend to harbor insect pests and diseases. So it's important for you to apply timeously herbicides to control weeds, or to come in with manual weed control if it's the one that you're going to be using in your field. However, manual weed control is quite tedious, and it's also required to be used maybe on a small piece of land as opposed to large scale or medium scale production. The ideal situation would be for you to have a weed-free field for the whole cropping cycle. But the critical period is within the first 10 to 12 weeks, where 50% of your yield can be lost in the first 1 to 5 weeks due to poor weed control. Herbicide selection speaks to chemical control, and we are advocating for effective use of this by understanding the nitty-gritties that come with herbicide selection. First and foremost is the crop type. You need to take note of the crop that you're going to be applying the product in. Herbicides, they do not apply, it doesn't apply that if it's all beans, then this herbicide is going to work. Say, for example, if you take soya beans and you take sugar beans, the herbicide that works there might differ in the sense that one herbicide that works in soybean, when applied in sugar bean, can burn the whole crop. For example, using active ingredient names, if you apply metribuzin, a pre-emergent herbicide recommended for broadleaf weeds in soybeans, if you apply it in sugar beans, the whole sugar bean crop will be burnt. If you apply classic, a post-emergent herbicide, which is recommended for soybean, broadleaf weed control, if you apply it in sugar bean, the whole sugar bean crop will be burnt down. So you really need to pick your herbicide wisely based on the crop that you're going to establish. You will need to also take note of the weed spectrum, which speaks to the issue of whether the weeds are broadleaves, grasses, or sedges. The weed stage of growth, it's ideal for you to control weeds at 3 to 5 leaf stages, because once they've overgrown, chances are they'll just be shriveled or affected briefly and recover within a few days. You also need to take note of the rotation plan, where some herbicides that might have been used in prior crops might pose challenges in your current crop of sugar beet. For example, atrazine, which requires a period of about 18 months, it has a residual effect of 18 months. Depending on the rate that is applied, it also depends on the tillage level when you want to establish the next crop, but generally between 16 to 18 months. So it means when you establish your sugar beet crop, atrazine will register it as a weed and it will destroy it. So you need to be guided accordingly. The climatic conditions are also important, where the rain fastness of the product should be considered. Some products, or rather most herbicides, have a rain fast period that is within the ranges of 4 to 6 hours, which is to say you need to apply your product when it's not raining, as opposed to you chasing the rains by trying to apply just before the rain starts, because you risk washing off your chemical and incurring losses by buying another product or coming in with manual weeding. Costs is another topical issue. You need to make a cost-benefit analysis before you buy any herbicide, because there are a wide range of products on the market. So you need to choose wisely, guided by cost analysis. Effective use of herbicides depends on correct interpretation of that document that wraps around the product that you're going to use, that we call the label. It's usually not fun to read the label, but it's the document that contains all the information that will make a difference between correct and wrong application of the product. Contact agrochemical companies for more information on the application of herbicides. So this is just a chart to highlight some of the products that are available on the market for control. The important thing to note is that chemicals come in active ingredient and trade names. You need to be guided by the active ingredient name, as this is the name that is going to be the same across the whole world, as opposed to the trade name, which might differ. So in some instances, you might buy the wrong product, whereby you're buying a trade name that is similar to one that you have used before, when in actual sense, the active ingredient is not recommended for that particular crop. Insect pest control is another element of grave importance when you are doing crop production. In any cropping venture, you need to first look at the problematic rabble-rouser type of insects that are going to come in to that cropping venture, and prepare well in advance. The important pests in sugar bean production are the bean stem maggot. The bean stem maggot is a problematic insect pest, in that in the first month, it can account for about 50 to 100% of the loss of your crop stands. As you can see on the picture that is highlighted there, the maggot, which is the adult fly, will lay its eggs in the stem, on the stem, and the larva will hatch, the maggot will hatch inside the stem and cause the swelling of the stem, the area that meets the ground, it will be swollen. And it would disrupt the movement of nutrients and water, thereby resulting in the wilting of the crop. So within the first month, you need to manage bean stem maggot. And the products on the market are vast, but an example of an active ingredient that has been used extensively over time and is effective is diazinon, which can be applied at day 3, day 6, day 13, and day 20 respectively. But you need to make sure that within the first month, you deal with bean stem maggot. Otherwise, you'll be found wanting. The other insect pests that can wreak havoc in sugar bean production are highlighted in pictorial form, where you can see the cutworm, which can cut at the base where the stem meets the ground, the white grub, especially if you're going to be using organic matter or manure from cattle, you find that the white grub is prone to be prevalent there. And you also find that the aphids, especially, have you ever noticed on a bean crop that aphids, those black aphids that cover the stem, they will be sucking sap from the crop and spreading viruses. So you need to manage them effectively and on time. Then the strip that is below is highlighting the insect pests that are most likely to come during the the flowering stages of development of the sugar bean crop, where we have the beautiful looking flower beetle, but beautiful as it may look, it's devastating in that it will consume the flowers, which will affect the pod filling stage. We also have the semi-loopers, which will consume the foliage, and the stink bug, which upon consumption, they also tend to result in the wilting of the points that they will have passed through. So pest control should always be guided by the problematic insect pests that you are facing, and you need to do correct identification. Otherwise, you risk applying the wrong product and build the resistance of that insect pest when in actual cases you were able to control it. The other tip in terms of pest control is regular scouting. Regular scouting in a systematic way, where you come in and go inside the field. You check at the bottom of the leaves, at the back of the leaves, on the growing points, because these insect pests are not just going to hide in plain sight. They will also hide at points where you will not easily find them. In terms of disease management, you need to scout regularly for problematic diseases in the field. But another important tip that we might give you today is the selection of your seed. If you select seed that is tolerant to most problematic diseases, like the sugar bean rust and the angular leaf spot, which are fungal, then you reduce the need to come in with curative fungicides, where thereby incurring a cost which will increase on your cost structure and reduce your return per dollar invested. So you need to safeguard your pocket by investing in the correct genetics that are going to save on money and save on value. You also need to take note, however, of the fact that there are some bacterial diseases and viral diseases that might be difficult to manage, especially the bacterial diseases, where you find that some of the bacterial diseases might be more prevalent during seasons of excessive rainfall, where waterlogging conditions are prone. This is just a graph to highlight the different products that are available on the market. The list is vast, but you also need to be guided by the fact that you can select from a wide pool, guided by the cost structure and the active ingredient of the product that you are applying, as well as the correct identification of the insect pest. Another topical issue that we would just like to highlight is the seed dressing, where we recommend that seed dressing be used during the planting stages when you are establishing your sugar bean crop. Together with your rhizobium, there is some seed dressing available on the market that is compatible with the use of an inoculant. So you can apply that safely and without much of a challenge. On that note, I'll hand you over to Emmanuel to give us some take-home messages and to summarize before we get into the many or multiple questions that we are seeing on the screen, and we'll answer to them as much as we can. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Okay. So, dear farmers, you need to know that this is the ideal sugar bean season, and according to the calendar, it starts today, the 15th of January, in the Middelveld. So please make use of this opportunity. Sugar bean is a very, very healthy grain. Therefore, we can actually improve the health of our nation by adopting planting of sugar bean. Sugar bean is also of good importance to us as farmers because it improves the soil structure, and by the virtue that sugar bean fixes nitrogen to the soil, it also improves the soil fertility. And above all, sugar bean is very, very profitable. Therefore, farmers, please take this message home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for giving us the take-home message. So the important thing there, farmers, like Emmanuel has already said, sugar bean is profitable. The varieties Seedco is the best varieties on the market, and you can grow your crops extensively across the country because sugar bean is adaptable. So before we get into the questions, I would just like to conclude by highlighting a few quotes, rather 3 quotations that I found to be quite interesting and in line with the farming and activity. Crop Life said, and I quote, "Once in your life, you need a doctor, you need a lawyer, a policeman, you need a preacher. But every day, 3 times a day or more, depending on your timetable, you need a farmer. So always do your best. What you plant, you will harvest later. Even the Bible says you reap what you sow." So lastly, I would like to just quote the words of one of the most influential people in the agricultural sector, Akinwumi Adesina, the 2-time president of the African Development Bank, who said, and I quote, "The next set of billionaires in Africa will be farmers." So he got me there on billionaires in Africa and farmers. So who wouldn't want to be a billionaire? Jump onto the bandwagon, grow Seedco varieties, grow Seedco crops, grow sugar bean now so that you can be quite profitable in your farming venture. Also, take heed of the COVID regulations that are being given on a day-to-day basis on different platforms, because COVID is real and COVID will take lives. We are only as efficient and essential as long as we are alive. On that note, I would just like to invite questions, and thank you all for taking time to listen to our PowerPoint presentation. Remember, the link is going to be shared. So on that note, I will just go into the questions that we have just received. I'll start off with this one here. We got on YouTube from Happy Mo Guasha. As a seed distributor, do you have a good market for sugar beets other than Mbari? Thank you very much, Happy Mo, for that question. It's important for you to always check for your market, which is the market analysis element, before you do any cropping venture. So we as Seedco, we have leads to the markets that you can sell your crop. You can sell to the Grain Marketing Board. You can sell to processing companies like National Foods, your Victoria Foods. Different markets can take sugar beet. You can sell to institutions and hospitals. There's a wide range of areas where you can sell your sugar beet. You can also embark on value addition, where you can package your sugar beet, put a brand on it, and sell it, thereby getting more value out of it. Thank you very much for that question we got on YouTube. Then moving on to the questions that we got on the chat. There is one question from Mandlan Komo, who's asking us, please clarify the altitude for the mid-veld. Maybe I'll just give that to Emmanuel to answer. Just the rate of the altitude for the mid-veld, Emmanuel.
So the range of altitude of the mid-veld, it ranges from, say, 1,000 meters above sea level, up to around 1,100.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for that. The important thing is to always be in touch with the agroecological region that you are in and get an understanding of that agroecological region, its rainfall pattern, its height above sea level, as well as other factors that might be in line with that agroecological zone. Now we go to the next question, a bit lengthy, but I'll read it as is. We got it from Letina Mapise, who says, "Good day. I am Letina from Banket and a new farmer in sugar beet. I have a field that I planted sugar beet on the 14th, which is close to a maize field. At 3 weeks, I came in with a post imagine herbicide of Russell and atrazine in my maize field using a boom sprayer. There was a drift which affected the sugar beet crop. Some parts have already dried up and some parts are fighting to survive. What would you advise me to do? Should I just wait and see what survives and what doesn't? Can I replant?" That is an important question, and it highlights a lot of issues. We spoke about the climate issues like the wind speed and the drift. So when you are spraying, you also need to take note of whether or not there's a lot of wind and the direction of the wind, they say, so that you don't incur cases of drift. So the extent of damage maybe would determine whether or not you need to replant or wait for the recovery of the crop or wait for the new growth or the foliage to come up, I would recommend that after this webinar, you send through some pictures of your sugar bean crop so that we can be in a better position to assist you effectively, having seen the pictures of the crop that has been affected. Otherwise, thank you very much for that detailed question. The next question is from Precious Nyamugama, who says, I would appreciate a recording. Recordings will be shared after, a link will be shared where you can then view this presentation at the comfort of your homes and at your own convenience. Then the other one is from Anonymous. Anonymous says, my soil pH is 4.9. I was told we have to add lime to correct that, but unfortunately lime takes 4 months to show optimal results. Is there any way that I can be assisted? Can I plant my beans without applying lime? Maybe I'll hand that over to you, Emmanuel, for an answer, a quick answer.
So I think that you should look for an alternative portion to plant your sugar bean. Otherwise, you are going to compromise your yields if you use this field, because you definitely need 4 months for the lime to start working. So it's better not to plant or seek for another field to use.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Or you can also maybe just come in with your crop, but like Emmanuel is saying, the lime will take time to work, but the process will start. Though you will not realize the full benefit, the process will start if you apply it after about 3 to 4 weeks. It will start, but it takes about 3 to 4 months for it to be fully effective. Our next question is from Amandla Wadzingaire. The question says, hi Wendy, what is inoculation? First time farming sugar bean at commercial level. Thank you very much for that question. And it's very important. I'm sure it's a question on many farmers' minds. Inoculation is the process of introducing the bacteria, the inoculant, to the crop or to the seed in a bid to increase the process that was already occurring, but to push it up so that you get that commercial value and increase the yield level. So the inoculant that is constantly referred to is rhizobium, which is a bacteria, which is living. So as a living bacteria, it needs to be kept in conditions that it desires so that it will perform the work that you want it to perform when you apply it. So for sugar bean, for legumes, you can use the recommended rhizobium strain that is in line with that particular legume crop. For sugar bean, there is a bacteria for legumes that you can apply, the rhizobium bacteria that you can apply, the effectiveness of which is still under investigation. But however, in the event that you have applied the rhizobium, maybe after about 6 to 7 weeks, when the process of fixation is expected to have started about 6 to 7 weeks, you see that your crop is pale. Maybe the rhizobium will not have worked. You can come in with a light application of top dressing fertilizer in the form of AN and apply about 100 to 150 kgs per hectare. Don't over apply ammonium nitrate because it will cause luxurious vegetation at the expense of the crop. The next question is it good to spray glyphosate in the land that you want to grow beans? And how long does one take to plant after spraying glyphosate? Glyphosate or Roundup is one of the most abused herbicides on the market because it's a non-selective herbicide and it should be applied on weeds that have emerged. So it will only kill whatever is green at the time of application. So the germination time that sugar bean takes is slightly less than the one that maize takes. So you are recommended to apply glyphosate well in advance of planting so that there are no chances of a little bit of the herbicide that is left in the soil before photodegradation is occurred to affect the germination of the crop. Otherwise, it doesn't work on weed seeds that are in the ground. It works on anything that is green at the time of application. Then another question for you, Emmanuel. I have been looking for sugar bean seed varieties from Manu Sonani. I've been looking for sugar bean varieties in Mutare since the beginning of the year. Any leads? We'll then link you up with our agronomists in Mutare he or she will be able to assist you on where you can buy your seed, and this will then be a time for you to start planting. Are there any specific herbicides recommended for sugar beans, and do you recommend pre or post emergence? Yes, there are some specific herbicides, but like we rightfully said, it should be guided by the weed spectrum, and the type of weed that you want to apply. Pre-emergent and post-emergent herbicides are available, but you need to engage agrochemical agronomists for them to give you a detailed explanation in line with the weed spectrum that you have. There's a question here, Emmanuel, from Anonymous. The question says, what is the difference between UKULINGA and GADRA?
Okay. UKULINGA, it matures later than GADRA, because GADRA matures in 65 days after planting, and UKULINGA matures between 85 days to 95 days after planting. So that's the major difference. The other difference is that GADRA has got purple flowers and UKULINGA has got white flowers.
Thank you very Thank you very much. For the benefits of Farai Matenga, who has just joined, is asking for us to just give a highlight of the varieties again. Just in summary, the varieties that are recommended of the sugar bean crop. Emmanuel.
We recommend that you choose a variety that does well in your area, because varieties sometimes they can be area specific, but I can recommend you to go for UKULINGA because of its high yield, large seededness, and also its erectness. If you want to use a combine to reduce costs at harvesting, you can use a combine. If you are located in an area where there is less rainfall, you can go for GADRA because it can escape drought. It just needs 65 days, which is 2 months and a week to mature.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, we'll try to respond to as many questions as we can. Which from Shailet Magunde, which planting dates are perfect for Banket, Mashonaland West? And also there's another question which is asking for the best varieties for Darrendale. So you can give us the two responses and just highlight briefly the varieties that are recommended for the high veld, and if there's much of a difference between varieties recommended for the low veld.
Okay, in Banket, you can start planting now, 15 January up to 15 February. And another good thing about Banket, it's warm in Banket, so you tend to realize better yields because the heat units accumulate very quickly. Darrendale also falls in the same category as Banket. You can also plant your sugar bean starting from now up to the 15th of February.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for that. There's a question from Lalwen, from Mr. Moyo, who is asking, can I farm using cattle manure only without putting fertilizers and get good harvests? So to this question, I would like to say it's possible, but fertilizer or nutrient management should be guided by soil analysis. This is the only sure way for us to know the state of the soil and the organic matter, organic content of the soil, so that we are able to apply the necessary nutrients that will add value to our crop in line with the nitrogen, phosphorus, potash ratio, as well as the trace elements that the crop might require. The next question is, there's a question from Faith Mbengo, Emmanuel. Faith is asking, is it late to plant now? Maybe you can re-emphasize that this is the time for them to plant this crop.
Okay, Faith Mbengo, you are in Kadoma, right? So it is not late to plant now. It is the beginning of the planting season for sugar bean. So look for your inputs. Come to Seedco and purchase sugar bean seed and start planting. You can plant up to the 15th of February.
Thank you very much. So we'll just take one more question. We are getting a lot of questions from farmers asking for the varieties that are specific to their areas. So it's important for you to note that our varieties can be grown across the whole country, our sugar bean varieties. It's a matter of timing. You just need to make sure that you are planting when at a time when the crop is able to get the much needed rainfall. If it's a 100% rain-fed crop, the much needed rainfall to reach physiological maturity in line with the days to maturity as alluded to by Emmanuel, which range from day 65 up to day 110, depending on your area. But as a rough guide, determinate varieties which tend to mature a bit earlier can be planted in the mid veld, whilst in the indeterminate varieties can be planted in the low veld. So you need to stand guided by that. Then as we round up, our last point is to re-emphasize that farming is indeed a profitable business. You just need to start right with the right technical expertise and the right seed, coupled with good agronomic practices. Seedco is your one-stop shop for all your seed solutions, be they field crops or horticultural crops. We are here to provide you with a service. We have an extensive distribution network, and we have agronomists in every province ready to assist you. Visit our website on www.seedcogroup.com for more information and for more literature. We can also download our app, our Seedco app, and get more information from there on the different cropping ventures that you can embark on. Again, thank you so much for spending time with us during this webinar. We wish you well as you establish your sugar bean crop for the 2021 farming season. Remember, farming is indeed a business. It starts with the right seed coupled with good agronomic practices. On behalf of myself and my co-presenter, Emmanuel, would like to say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.